So what we would do is go to the scene properties, units, and set the unit scale to 0.01. And I am going to go ahead and hide this. And the spiral or spring. We will then bring up the secondary armature and spiral that we have applied, and we are going to Shift A, get out of pose mode first, then Shift A, and add a cube, which is very large. We're still in grid snap, so we will grab on the Z axis, go into wireframe mode, and then select our armature, and we will scale it up to about the size of the cube. Great. And then we can go ahead and delete the cube. So now we're ready to set this up for use in Unreal, but the rotations and the locations, but now the locations and rotations need to be applied slightly differently because it's a much larger scale. So one thing I would do before we begin is press A and apply the location, rotation, and most definitely the scale. All right, so we're working within Unreal Scale, which means that grabbing on the Z-axis works a little bit differently, and I have to be more careful about ensuring that certain parts of the suspension spring doesn't squish within to other parts. So what I would do is Control Tab, A, Insert, Location Rotation. We will move to frame 30. We'll start with the top bone and work our way down instead of bottom to the top. And then we will grab Z minus 0.05 and then just work our way down from there. And I'd say that's squished in just enough. So I'm going to press A, Insert, Location, Rotation, Shift duplicate the first frame, bring it up to frame 60. Yeah, that's enough. I mean, if I were to go any further, it probably wouldn't look very good. I could probably stretch it to 0.04 and get away with it, but for tutorial purposes, I'm going to keep it at 0.05 like I have it. We're going to jump up to frame 90, and we're going to do the same thing, just backwards, and I don't have to worry about working my way from the top to the bottom. We'll just start with the third bone and then work our way up. So grab Z 0.05. All right, and then A, insert location rotation, and then shift duplicate this frame and move it to frame 120. And of course, A, right click, interpolation, and linear. Fantastic. So we have an Unreal Scale spring that is squashing and stretching properly. And I'm just going to say this is SS underscore UE5. And then we will duplicate this, jump back to the first frame and delete, which gets rid of that. And then we will go to this here, and while all the bones are selected, we will insert location rotation, and of course we will select this second bone, shift select the top bone, shift control C, inverse kinematics, and make sure to change the iterations to 8. Test it out. Fantastic. We will then jump to frame 30. Rotate minus 30 degrees. Rotate 10, minus 10. A, insert location rotation. Select the first frame, shift duplicate, bring it to 60. See that it bends back. Jump to frame 90. Select the second bone, rotate 30. Second bone, 10. A, insert location rotation, and then duplicate and bring to frame 120. And of course, A, right click, interpolation, and linear. Great. Which we will now name this one S2S UE5 and save. So that being said, now I can select the mesh and the armature, file, export, FBX, mesh and armature, selected objects, scroll down to geometry and select normals, and select face. Everything else can be left alone. We do need the armature, but no leaf bones, and of course bake animation. And I will export this as Spring Toot FBX, or you can name it, but you can name it whatever you want. Great. So now I will pull up Unreal. And the content drawer. Let's go ahead and click and drag this in. We want to make sure that this is a skeletal mesh and that it also imports the animations. Import all. Awesome. Brings it in. I will go ahead and save all. Everything looks like it's properly scaled just within this thumbnail setup. I'm going to close this, and then we will take a look at our animation side to side. All right, and look at that. We'll also look at squash and stretch, which for some reason is really small on that regard. Ah, I see. So it brought in animations that it didn't need. So actually, I don't need this one. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. Because these are not UE5 based. We want the ones that say UE5, which there's only 2. Great. All right, so now that you have the basic concept down, we're going to go ahead and import a model from Sketchfab. This one is by Guy Savage, and it is a shock absorber for a motorcycle or a dirt bike, mostly dirt bikes. And don't forget to check out the other content from their channel and say thank you, and possibly even leave a follow. So that being said, let's go ahead and import that in. Great. And I'm going to clear parent and keep transformation. And I'm also going to grab this on the z-axis and bring it down to about here. Let's take a look. So I want it about there. And then I'm going to set its location. I'm actually going to rotate this 90 degrees, minus 90. There. Take a look at what I got. I'll have to bring it down a bit. Yeah, that seems okay. And we're just going to select the spring itself and Control J to join it all together. For some reason it's been separated, but that's no biggie. And then I'm going to select everything else and kind of join it together based on certain parts. Awesome. And again, I just want to make sure that I set the location, rotation, and scale on all of this. Good. So I now have 3 separate parts, though I knew this was going to be a bit of a nuisance here. So I'm going to go ahead and separate this from the cylinder portion and join it up with the top part. Just getting rid of some unnecessary bits. All right, we're good to go. So I'll select this and the armature, and then we will Control P with automatic weights. Let's see what we got. All right, so it's moving as it should, though we won't need the side-to-side feature. So I'm just going to switch this to UE5, and then I'm also going to take a look at this. And I need to do a mesh cleanup merge by distance. Because as you remember, it was split up in bits, and so that's causing issues now. So I'm just want to look at this right quick, and I think we're good. All right, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to use the provided suspension spring, so I will go ahead and make my own. And what we will do is just Shift A to add a circle, rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis. I'm going to scale this down to 0.1. And then we're going to move it over X to about here. I'm going to scale it down a little more. Scale 0.75. And then we'll just adjust accordingly. Now, all I need to do is, I'm going to move it over just a bit. Yeah, that seems okay. And then we'll go to the screw modifier. I'll just set it at 3 for now. with 8 iterations on the y-axis. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and scale this down a bit and move it into position. Yeah, that seems okay. Let's bump up the iterations. Yeah, that seems all right. Cool. And I'll go ahead and apply this. We will select the second armature, and I will Control P with automatic weights. And we should get a similar squash and stretch. That looks all right. Now I just want to hide this for a sec. And I want to select this, Control Tab. I want to go into pose mode. There we go. And I'm just going to parent to this bone here. So that it follows along with it. And then I'll also basically do the same thing by selecting this and the armature, Control Tab, and then we will parent this portion to the root bone. So now it all should move together. And then we can just bring back our newly created suspension spring, and we have our functioning shock absorber. And because it was all set up with this position on the z-axis, when I rotate it, it follows that same squash and stretch angle. That looks really good. I'm pleased with that. So if I were to go ahead and save this and select all of these, and we will now set it up to export into Unreal. Go ahead and save. And we have everything selected. Go to File, Export, FBX. Select our mesh, armature, selected objects, geometry, face, and everything else stays the same. Go ahead and export this. And go ahead and create a new folder and just name it. That way I can bring in my other stuff. Cool. Now I can import this. I want to make sure that it is a skeletal mesh and that it also has import animations. And I like to import all. All right, so there are a lot more animations than I actually need, but I know that that has a lot to do with it being a duplicate of the armature being a duplicate. So that's why I have so many here. I'm just going to delete the ones that I don't need once it's done. And then we will just stick with the only one that I need, which is the squash and stretch. So all I should have now is the squash and stretch. Look at that. That looks fantastic. Great. All right, so you're not limited to just suspension springs. You can actually utilize it for other spring type objects similar to like what you'd see maybe in a platformer game like Sonic the Hedgehog. So I'm going to go into edit mode, select all of my bones here, or pose mode, and select all of my bones here. And then we want to just move some things around. So we'll knock it down to 10. Yeah, that seems okay. We got the wind up, the spring up, and then comes back down. And then what I could do is I could back up to the first frame. We can Shift A. Actually, we'll get out of pose mode. Shift A, add a cube, scale it on the Z axis 0.1, grab C, and I'll give it a little more depth than that. So I'll scale Z 1.5. Yeah, there we go. And then we just select our armature, Control Tab, select the bone that we want to parent it to, and Control P, bone. Awesome. Control Tab, A, File, Export, FBX, and then we'll call this one Jump. Mesh, armature, selected objects, geometry, base, and export. And bring it in. Make sure that scale to mesh and that the import animations. Now I didn't apply the scale to the cube, but I'm sure it'll turn out fine. Go ahead and save all and close this out, close that out. And let's take a look at our animation. Awesome. So that's the general concept of creating and setting up springs in Unreal Engine from Blender to Unreal Engine 5. You could also keep that same concept within the confines of Blender, which means that the scale is going to be much smaller. The whole point is that you want to make sure that those bones are separated in a way so that you can utilize the squash and stretch without altering the volume of the spring in a negative way. So we're pushing past using shape keys. We're pushing past using rigs that don't necessarily support the squash and stretch in a way that is helpful, in a way to where it can be basically transferred to other springs without any particular issues other than maybe altering the amount of squash and stretch you have depending on the number of frames that you're using. So now we can take this same concept and put it towards a motorcycle suspension, which I have in my advanced Blender to Unreal Engine 5 tutorial, which you can see right here. Thank you for watching my content. I really hope that you found this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.